Today, I would like to talk about the occult law of substitution. The occult law of substitution. This is one of the most powerful tools in our arsenal, and it's really the crux of all magic. Okay, so I'm going to show you a way to work with this law today. That's very simple, but very powerful. And there are many, many ways to employ this law, and you will be able to come up with those on your own as time goes by. All right. So, first of all, we recognize that all experience in the three dimensions are nothing more than reflections of something in the invisible. So there is no such a thing as something in the third dimension that does not have its astral equivalent, its astral source. So the world of cause, and most of you know this, but it bears repeating, the world of cause is in the invisible, and the world of effect is the visible. So trying to change things that are in the world of effect at their own level is very frustrating for most people. It's been talked about as trying to rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. You know, you just changing stuff around in the physical isn't going to make any difference if the thought form behind that's the source of it, the cause of it, is not changed. And so every kind of magic is constantly or any effective magic is constantly finding ways and means to change those thought forms so that we now have a thought form that's going to create something that we do want rather than creating something we don't want. Okay, so you hear about that all the time in law of attraction and things like that. But the problem with a lot of, and I don't mean any disrespect to law of attraction. I'm sure that there's some of it's very valid. I just don't know enough about it. You know, I hear about it, but I don't know enough about it to know. But you got to be careful that you don't trivialize what we're talking about. It's not just a passing thought is all that's needed. A passing thought does not do much. It's the deep-seated habitual thoughts that are responsible for creating the bulk of the forms in our lives. Not only the deep-seated habitual thoughts within our mind, but within the consciousness of the group mind of humanity as a whole. Okay? So when you're dealing with magic, you're trying to actually alter the causes so that you get new results, and that's not an insignificant thing to be attempting to do. It's very profound, and it's very challenging, and it requires great discipline and great training to be effective in it. And the way you get that training is you work it. And you know, many of you who have taken my course, A Witch's Primer, know that you can really work your mind. You can really work your abilities magically to make changes in your life. But it just like, you know, personal training. You can go to the gym and exercise and get a great body too. But it doesn't just happen because you happen to do a sit-up once or something. It's a long-term process that you're very, very well committed to. Okay, so but let's talk about how we can employ this occult law of substitution and what it actually is. So the way that we employ the occult law of substitution here is that we recognize that there are principles and shadows. I talk about this a lot. We talked about that. I gave a course a while back called Dark Magic, and I'm going to revisit that at some point. There's parts of that course I'm not happy with, so I'm not going to actually bring the course itself back, but I am going to do some version of it at some point. But the basis of it is that the shadow self is the ego, is an attempt to thwart or shadow a principle. Okay, and this is how that works. For instance, if you're afraid, fear is not a principle. it's a blocking or shadowing of a principle. In this case, it's the blocking or shadowing, usually of the principle of love. There's if you're experiencing sickness, that's not a principle. There's no principle of sickness. That's a shadowing or blocking of the principle of life. If you're confused, the confusion is not, there's no principle of confusion. It's a shadowing or blocking of the principle of infinite intelligence. If you are being lied to, or if you are lying, there is no principle of a lie. There's no principle of lie. A lie is the shadowing or blocking of the principle of truth. Do you see? There is no darkness. There's no such thing as a principle of darkness. There is no such thing as a principle of darkness. There's only a shadowing of the principle of light. Only the shadowing of a principle of light. Now, we're not saying that the shadows are bad. Okay, get really clear with that. We're not saying that shadows are wrong. In fact, you can't have three-dimensional reality without a shadow. There's no way, because shadow equals form. There's no way to have form without shadow. So it's not that they're bad. It's just that they're shadows, right? It's not that colored pencils on a piece of paper are bad. It's just a shadowing of the white paper. You know what I mean? It's not that they're bad, it's giving form. So the shadow has its function. It has its function. But if there's a problem in your life, or if there's an unfulfilled desire in your life, what you can do is not look to the shadow and try to change the shadow, but instead look to the principle that represents what you want, or the principle that represents that which the problem is shadowing, and substitute the shadow for the principle. Substitute the shadow for the principle. So, when you are experiencing a lack of let's say you're experiencing a lack of money. Well, there is a principle of abundance, but there's no principle of lack. There's a principle of prosperity, but there's no principle of poverty. So if you're experiencing poverty, it's that you're experiencing a shadowing or blocking of the principle of prosperity. So then what you need to do is substitute the principle for the shadow at that point. If you're experiencing an argument with someone, the tension is not a principle, it's the shadowing of the principle of peace. So then you would substitute that argument for the principle of peace. Okay? And it's really that simple, but it's something that you have to be very vigilant about. It's not like, again, it's not something that you just do once and you cast a spell and just like hope for the best. In order to cast a spell like this, your spell needs to take. And sometimes that requires you to plant those seeds again and again and again until one takes. Because sometimes that ground is so infertile because of the so much of a commitment that you've had for so long to the shadow, that the ground in your mind is not fertile to accept the seeds of the principle, right? So you need to repeat over and over and over again whatever operation you're using that's trying to substitute one thing for the next so that spell can take. And you'll know that it's begun to take because you start to feel better. You'll start to feel better, and that's a cue that your spell has begun to take. And when you start to feel better about something, then you don't need to worry about casting spells about it anymore, because that means that the spells that you've cast are working. And one of the most simple spells that you can cast is using this law of substitution. In fact, it's so simple that many people don't even consider it a spell, because there's no candles, there's no rhymes, there's no invocations, there's nothing. All you're doing is, when you notice the problem, you just say to yourself, I call upon the law of substitution. Where there is discord, there is now peace. Where there was discord, there is now peace. And you just do it over and over and over again. I call upon the law of opulence, or I call upon the law of prosperity. Where there was poverty, there is now abundance. I call upon the law of prosperity. Where there was poverty, there is now abundance. And you just keep at it over and over again. No matter what evidence to the contrary, three-dimensional reality keeps shoving in your face, because that's what is that? That's the manifestation of an old thought form. So you can't just expect those old thought forms to just go away one day when you've been fostering them for many years, many times. So you just keep at it, and you're fearless about that. Say you're afraid. Say you're in great fear. Well, you know that that's shadowing the principle of love. You know that perfect love casts out all fear. That's not just Jesus that said that. That's just a principle. That's just fact. That's just the truth. Doesn't matter who said it. It's just the reality of the situation. If there is perfect love, there is no fear. That's just how that works. So if you're feeling fear, it just means that somehow you're blocking the principle of love. And so you say, I call upon the law of substitution. Where there was fear, there is now perfect love. You could even say perfect love now casts out all fear. You can say that. You say it however you want to. You can do it however you need to do it, but you just need to do it. You need to recognize that you're involved in a shadow that is causing you problems. There's no judgment on that. It's not that you're bad, right? You're just noticing it. And then you decide to call upon the law of substitution to replace this experience with the actual principle that it's trying to thwart, that it's trying to shadow, that it's trying to block. Let's use a couple other examples. Let's say you were looking for a job and you couldn't find a job. You'd need to find out, you need to ask yourself, well, what principle am I shadowing? Why can't I find the job? Well, you just ask yourself, a couple questions. Why can't I find a job? Well, there's not enough jobs. There's not enough. Well, maybe it's just that you can't find them. Maybe it's just that maybe there are enough jobs, but you're just not being able to find them because your joblessness, your unemployment is shadowing your employment. And so instead of looking for a job on the three-dimensional level only, you can say, I call upon the law of substitution. Where there was unemployment, let there be infinite intelligence to show me where the job is. Let infinite intelligence guide me here and now to the perfect employment. I call upon the law of substitution. Let infinite intelligence replace unemployment. Right? So let's just go through a couple of just ideas of what these principles are. There's many of them, but some of the main ones that are the ones that the 7 archangels rule. So let's just go through those. And again, you can call on these archangels as well, but you don't need to. As long as you're calling on the principle, you can use it. You don't have to call on any particular deity or archangel, but remember that these principles are what deities are. I guess we need to talk about that really quickly. That in the ancient mind, that has always been there's always been wisdom. There's always been wisdom, and so the every kind of faith and religion has always had 2 different sides to it. There's been the esoteric side, which is for the wise people, the magi. And then there's been the exoteric version of a religion, which is for the masses who don't want to think for themselves. So if you're looking at anything from that perspective, just look back in time and you can recognize that every god and goddess from any pantheon, whether it be Greek or whether it be the angels from the biblical pantheon, or whether it's the Greek pantheon, or whether it's anything, whether it's Yoruba, it doesn't matter. Any religion, those gods and goddesses represent these qualities. They represent these qualities. Now, what's happened is they are so entrenched within the cultures out of which they came and out of the superstitions of many of the exoteric versions of these religions that a lot of times these gods and goddesses get tied up as having personalities, and being basically, divine egos. And that's not truly what they are. All of these gods and goddesses are personifications of infinite principle. Okay, so now we're just dealing with them on the abstract, but you can also deal with them as gods and goddesses as long as you don't do it superstitiously. So let's just look at some of these. So like for Michael, that's the sun. So that's all of your solar deities, gods, Apollo and Sol and Helios and Ra, all of the sun gods. We could put in there that one of the biggest divine principles is life. Infinite life, the principle that's beating your heart, infinite life. Okay, so you call upon that law of occult substitution with life anytime you need healing of your body, anytime you're fatigued, anytime you have any shadowing of that life principle that's manifesting in any way, you can substitute that principle for whatever those other problems are. I'm Gabriel, the archangel of the moon. It's Diana, that's Artemis, that's Selene, that's Luna, that's Isis. All of those lunar goddesses. Now we know that they represent childbirth and all of those things, but for the divine principle, they represent the soul. They represent the soul. So those goddesses are all about the actual extension of light that you are as an individuation of God, as an individuation of the one power. When I say God, not the God, not the male God, but of the Godhead, right? So that's so you call upon infinite soul anytime you feel like that you don't matter, or that you're not important, or that you're insignificant, or that nobody loves you, or whatever. You recognize, wait a minute, I'm a soul. I call upon the power of infinite soul. I call upon the power of the moon. I call upon that power to substitute these feelings of inadequacy. Okay, then you've got Mars, right? So on an infinite level, on a divine level, that's the law of spirit. That is the principle of spirit. What is spirit? Spirit is that which cannot be destroyed. It's indestructible. It's unassailable. You can't attack it. It cannot be attacked. It is invulnerable. It is absolutely invulnerable. So anytime you're feeling vulnerable, anytime you're feeling under attack, anytime there's any of those conflicts where you just don't feel safe, you call upon that law of infinite spirit. You call upon that principle, of infinite spirit to substitute, right? Infinite intelligence, that's Mercury. That's Raphael. That's Thoth or Tahuti or Hermes, right? All of those mercurial gods. So at their apex, they are infinite intelligence. That means there is not one thing on the face of the earth and beyond that infinite intelligence is not aware of and doesn't know about and does not have absolute mastery over, understanding. Isn't that nice to know that there's an intelligence in this universe that knows everything more than anybody else, that's smarter than everybody? Smarter than you, smarter than everybody that's ever walked the planet, and knows everything. That's infinite intelligence. So you're confused about something, you call upon infinite intelligence. You call upon that principle. You call upon the substitution for the problem that you're confused about for infinite intelligence. If you need to find out something, if you need to learn something, if you don't understand something, if there's a problem where you don't know where to turn, you don't know how, you call upon infinite intelligence. There is a force of nature that does know how. Okay, that's the same force that created, that knows how to guide the planets on their course. That knows how to do cell mitosis. That knows all of these things and designed all these things. Okay, infinite truth. Jupiter, Zeus, right? Thor, Sakiel, infinite truth. Boy, when you don't know if somebody's telling you the truth, that's okay. If somebody's lying to you, that's okay. Infinite truth can root that out. I substitute infinite truth for this. If you've been lying to yourself about something and you don't realize that that's, what it is, you can call upon infinite truth to cut through all of that. Maybe you think that you're not good enough. Maybe you think that you don't know enough. Maybe you think that you don't have what it takes. Maybe you think that there's something wrong with you. Well, infinite truth knows better. Call on infinite truth to show you the truth in any situation. Substitute the lies for truth. Infinite truth, right? Anael, Venus, Aphrodite, Freya. Infinite love. Perfect love. Perfect love. So casting out all fear, right? You're lonely, substitute loneliness for infinite love, perfect love. You're afraid, substitute that for perfect love. All right, so then we've got Cassiel on Saturday, or Saturn, or Kronos, all those underworld deities, right? But what is that also? That's the third sphere on the tree of life. That's also the divine mother, is Saturn. So, but that's divine principle. That's divine law. Divine principle. So when like say you're say you're involved with a lawsuit or somebody's suing you or something like that. Well, call upon the principle of call upon infinite principle, call upon divine law, and remind yourself you're not under any law but God's. You have no responsibility to anyone but God. And when you put yourself in that relationship, God takes care of the rest of it for you, because that's what light does. It shines away the darkness. So you just remind yourself, I'm not under any laws but God's, but any laws but divine law. I'm responsible to no one but the infinite, right? So you remind yourself of those things. You substitute the problem for the principle. You substitute the shadow for the principle. You substitute the darkness for the light, right? So a lot of times when people do shadow work, they do it well, and sometimes they don't do it well. We'll talk about shadow work later, but when you're going into doing shadow work, you're not there to exalt the shadow. You're not there to make the shadow something that's a type of deity. You're not there to worship the shadow. You're there to look at the shadow honestly and ask yourself, is this what I want? Are these the forms that I really, really want? Right? And are the things that I'm so afraid of in the shadows that I keep running away from, are they to be feared? No. So I can look at these things. I can look at these things very clearly. I can see what they are, but I can also substitute a principle for them, because all shadow is ultimately a lie. All shadow is ultimately a lie. Again, that is not a judgment on the shadow. We don't mean lie in that it's trying to, well, it is, but it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's not true. It's not real. It's an illusion. It's a way of making something appear to be other than it is. So all shadow in that regard is it's not that it's bad. It's that it's nothing. It's not that shadow is bad, it's that it's nothing. So we don't have judgments on ourselves because we have shadows. Of course you get shadows. Everybody's got shadows. We live in shadow land. We live in the shadow world. We live in the shadows. But we are not shadows. We are light. And it's very important to understand that. So start substituting this darkness and go for the darknesses for now that are causing you problems. Go for the darknesses that are feeling like conflict. Go for the darknesses that are causing you to pay attention to them. Start substituting these darknesses for the principles that you think that they are shadowing. And it doesn't matter if you get it wrong. It doesn't matter if you get it wrong. It's just like the Psalms. If you really, needed the principle of infinite truth, and you actually accidentally thought that you needed to call upon, divine law instead, that's okay. Divine law will lead you to infinite truth when necessary. God knows what it's doing. Spirit knows what it's doing. It doesn't need your help. It just needs your willingness. It doesn't need you to do it for it. You don't have to show light what to do. You just have to seek for the light. You don't have to show the light how to burn away your darkness. You just have to be willing to show it the darkness. You have to be willing to substitute light for the darkness. That's your job, is wanting it. And just real quickly before we end, that's part of the biggest problem that most people find with any kind of real lasting significant change, is that they don't know that they need to want it. They need to want change. They need to want to get beyond the problem. They need to want to let go of any so-called treasures or gifts that those problems are giving them. And a lot of times they don't want to even look at the fact that they do love their problems. They do worship their problems. They are getting some kind of payoff, neurotic payoff from the problem. Because if they saw the truth about that, of course they'd say, no, I don't want to do that. But the ego is too sly and cunning, because we are pretty amazing people. So it's our own intelligence used against us. So recognize that if there is a problem, part of you loves it. Part of you is addicted to it. Part of you wants to keep it. And that's part of what this law of substitution is for, is to make new choices and say, you know what? I don't want this anymore. I don't want to keep this darkness anymore. I call upon the law of substitution. All right? So play with that concept for a week and notice that you can cast some pretty significant spells pretty quickly. But just keep at it. Don't take no for an answer. All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope this was of help to you. I can't wait to work with you again. And until that time, blessed be.